Hey, chess fans, welcome back. Today I've got a game from the Tartakower of the Caro-Kann. This was a request from one of the ChessGoals courses students, and we wanted to look at some setups where white plays too solid, and they prevent our main attacking plan, which is the sacrifice on h3. And so let's jump into this. So here we have, white. We're just going to go through the normal. We get the normal sort of Caro-Kann lines. And we get this setup with the bishop to e2, which is actually a really pretty solid setup. And especially in conjunction with the bishop coming to e3 and the queen stacked behind it, white just has a really compact structure. And there's some subtleties of this bishop being on e2 rather than d3 that influence where we put our own bishop. And we're going to look at that today. So castles, and just all pretty standard looking development up to here. And it's not till this point that we have a decision to make. So typically, once we get to this point in our development, we're moving this bishop. But because of the way the white has set up, we're not really ready to do that just yet. So there's a few things to keep in mind. One, instead of the queen and bishop combo being here and here with pressure on the h7 square, white has chose to line his bishop and queen up instead on this diagonal. And this changes things a bit. So white's kind of threatening to play bishop to f4, which sort of forces the exchange of this bishop, which we hate. So we're actually going to delay developing the bishop just a moment and playing knight to g6, which gives us some extra control over this square. That wasn't actually possible for white to do that and move earlier, say here, because we can just take it and then we'll take on e2. So here we get knight g6, and then now it's c4. And this is like the moment where we actually really have to think about when is it time to move out our bishop and where exactly do we want it to go? Because we have three squares that all seem pretty reasonable. In this game, I chose to play bishop g4, which is not the most accurate. All three of the bishop moves are actually okay and relatively similar in evaluation, but one of them is a bit better than the others. Bishop g4 doesn't make quite as much sense here because after h3, we're not really ever threatening to take, and white still has this setup where they can very quickly deal with our eventual attacks on h3, which is basically, does the queen have the ability to get to d1, and does the bishop have the ability to get to f1? If those things are true, then trying to induce this h3 so that we can get our sacrifice in is not such a great option here. But I played this game a little bit like a caveman, and I really wanted this idea because it was the main idea that I know, and so I wanted to kind of look at and show some different sort of thinking here. Instead of bishop to g4, it's really actually better to play bishop to f5. And the reason for that is that because this bishop is on e2, we actually have this e4 square, which is a really nice square to pressure this knight. From g4, we don't actually exert quite as much pressure because this knight can move and we're just hitting against the bishop here. And we don't really want trades. Whereas when we have the bishop on e4, if this knight ever moves, well, then we have knight h4 and we're attacking with another piece, and we already have this bishop lined up, and this looks like a kind of a stronger attacking formation. So for example, if rook a1, which is how the game concluded, we have pretty normal idea if, for example, if we just play queen to e7 here, that's really the best line. Or sorry, bishop e4 first, my bad, my apologies, bishop e4, and then if d5, which is white's sort of main break, now we have this bishop, oops, somehow we set the board on autoplay there. We have this idea of playing queen to e7 after d5, and because we're making this threat, and so we don't really have to worry about this d5 push so much because we actually get a pretty strong counterattack out of it. If instead of d takes c6 here, white chooses to play a3, well, now we can just take the pawn, and they take back, and now we are going to play a6 because this square is kind of a problem, and we have a pretty solid game. Our bishops and knights look pretty nice. Now, one of the things that you might worry about when you play bishop f5 is what happens if they try to like kick our bishop out? Say they play bishop to d, or sorry, not here, but bishop to d3. Well, now it's a different story because we can go bishop to g4 now, and this is quite a bit different. We actually are threatening to take the knight immediately. The knight doesn't have anywhere useful to move to. I mean, it literally has no squares. Every one of them is covered by something or other somewhere. No moves whatsoever. So the bishop would have to drop back. And now we have queen d7 already. And if h3 now, This is very different than what we're actually going to see in the game because our sacrifice does work. And it's because white moved this bishop twice, and we got to put the knight on g6. That's the extra move that we got instead. And white doesn't have time to go for the natural setup that they want against this sacrifice. So, for example, we could take, takes, and then queen takes. And here, white really needs to play bishop to f1 or queen to d1, but they don't have time for that because the knight's going to be hanging. So, for example, if they try to play queen to d1, well, now we just have knight h4, and you don't have time to play bishop f1 because this is just a checkmate. So that's a really nice move order subtlety, and I hope kind of explains why bishop to g4 is not so great here, especially against the c5 setup where d5 is a big option, which is a reason why we maybe don't want to be on e6. Again, e6, still an equal game. Bishop g4, still an equal game. But in terms of trying to put pressure on white and make their position like uncomfortable, bishop to f5 is where we want to go. And we would love to be on one of these two squares, especially when white still has this nice defensive options available to them when they play h3. So after bishop to g4, my opponent does play h3. And here I have another opportunity to come back to f5 and execute the same idea. And it's probably still just about as good as it was before. This h3 might be a problem later. But instead I went back to e6. Again, I'm kind of just like using my normal idea, which is like, I'm just going to play bishop e6. I'm just going to play queen to d7. You know, and more common is this bishop on d3. And so maybe that's why I wasn't really thinking about this f5 square, because normally it's not available because there's a bishop on f3. Here it is. And now I played rook a1, and white is clearly planning to play d5. That's like the main idea that white has. I played queen to d7, which again is like caveman. I'm just going for this sacrifice. This is basically hope chess, which is really kind of a revelation for me because like I didn't think I played hope chess, but that's absolutely what this is. Now, normally when I think of hope chess, I think of like something that's like egregiously bad, and I'm just hoping that they don't fall for it. But that's not the case here. I'm not making something that's like horrid. I still have a pretty comfortable and normal like position, but I'm not putting the most pressure on white because I'm just going for this one sort of idea when there were other ideas in the position. Here, queen to e7 is actually stronger. And the point is that we have pressure against this b5 square, and we're looking to make a fork. And so, for example, if a3 gets played, now we can play the rook over to the d8, and this bishop e7 actually maybe makes sense here, where white's really looking at playing d5 and trying to open the file, and maybe we don't want our queen on that file. And so we, like, again, my point and what I'm really trying to talk about, and what I'm mostly talking to myself, because I'm sure none of you guys play this way, is that I should really start thinking more about the position and what's different about this position versus the ones that I normally am playing. So if we think of a pawn on c3, a queen on c2, and a bishop on d3, then d5 is not really such an idea. But here it is, and I didn't really adjust the way that I was playing in order to accommodate that idea. So white does strike with b5. And, you know, I realized that now that they're attacking this pawn, and I don't need to be that worried about it. Sorry, I'm still in the variation here. The game, I played d6 and then bishop f1. We forced bishop f1, and now I played rook a8, and it's here where d5 happened. a6 is absolutely required here. I really thought that it didn't matter if he played after I brought the rook across. For example, after rook d8, which is what I played, I thought that when this pawn hangs, we're not going to have a problem, and I'll demonstrate why. Because after c takes, now bishop f5. Look, I went bishop g4, bishop e6, back to bishop f5, and this f5 square was available all along, and the bishop was way more comfortable there. We get knight d4, and it looks like I'm going to drop my bishop, or not going to drop it, but I have to exchange it. And actually, I do have to exchange it. But my bishop is all I was thinking about because, like, I wanted to attack. I wanted to capture here. So I played this, which actually just is horrid. It just hangs this move, which is why I'm going back and saying that instead of bishop to e4, a6 is absolutely required. The only thing I was really looking at instead of knight d4 was bishop takes h7, which is actually the best move. It's actually far better than this knight d4 idea. I didn't give this any credence because I thought I'll just play rook to a8 and then I'll go win the pawn back. And so what? Big deal. I actually thought it was probably good for me because I have a rook on a2 and that looks like there's a lot of pressure. Turns out that it's actually really, really quite tricky. So for example, after I exchange the rooks and play this rook to a8, well, now just bishop to b6. And okay, fine, I get my pawn. And white just sort of laughs at me because now they have knight d4. And like my back rank is looking a little suspicious if I'm totally honest here. Like, in fact, I'm actually worried immediately about the rook coming in and then me having to block with the knight in some way. So for example, if knight takes, queen takes, the rook comes down, I got to block here, and then bishop c5 happens. So we can't really allow that. So bishop to e5, but now knight takes f5 anyway, and we take back with the queen, and now bishop to c5, and this pawn is gonna roll. Like, this is terrifying. So say I want to be greedy and grab this guy. Well, this is amazing because white can just sack their queen. And then after bishop takes b2, rook e8, this is just a checkmate on the board. I've got to play knight f1, and they've got to capture here. And this is definitely a moment where I looked at rook takes a2, and I thought, it's good. My rook's active. But I really should have calculated a little bit further because this is really quite dangerous. So instead, knight d4 was played. And after I played bishop e5, we get bishop b5. And I'm just going down an exchange now. And for the moment, I was like super frustrated. But then I started thinking, you know what? I do have these bishops. And I do have this queen. And I have this knight. Like, maybe I have some attacking chances here. And so I started to feel a little bit optimistic at first. And it turns out maybe I had some reason to be. So takes, and now takes. And here I played queen, sorry, he played knight back, which I was a little bit surprised by this move. I don't quite know the idea. I suspect his point is that he wants to try to exchange off the bishop. But after this, I'm actually immediately, all advantage is gone. We have a really nice idea, an idea actually I'm aware of. Now, I played queen to e5, or sorry, queen to e5, because I thought this mating idea. Turns out that's not so great. But instead, we have this really nice idea, knight h4. And we're attacking this pawn on h2, and we have this not so subtle threat of knight f3 winning the queen if this pawn never falls. So, for example, bishop f4, which is the best move, well, we can just immediately take knight, and we're already threatening this rook. And if really the best that white can do is to take our bishop, exchange, and then just give us the rook back. They get into all kinds of trouble if they don't give the rook back. So for example, if instead of taking the bishop, they played rook to f1, trying to hold on the material, now they're lost, game over. And we see the kind of the attacking power and some of these ideas that we have, this knight h4 idea in conjunction with the bishop on e4, why we have more attacking ideas in the Caro-Kann than just capturing on h3. Here, the follow-up would be we take, and then they take, and now we just play knight back to h4. And we have this massive threat of capturing on, sorry, not capturing, but playing knight to f3, and we would just be picking up the queen. White needs to move the queen, and we play knight f3 anyway. And now we've forced this king into this incredible discovery. I mean, we can play knight d2 anytime we want and pick up the rook. And now, so we go queen d6. We don't want the exchange back. We have way more than that. This knight, clearly far more powerful than this rook. And there's really just not anything that white can do. I mean, we're going to play g5 next and just pick up the piece. And if white's going to be lucky if they just manage to sack back the material and give us just being up a couple of pawns. Absolutely lucky if that were to happen. Instead, I played this queen e5, and now knight to f4. And again, this is a time when I calculated a line, and I thought I was like way back in the game. And I actually kind of am again. I can play queen to g5. And the only move that white has is f3. And then we can just take it. And this is a totally crazy position. Because after knight takes g6, attacking our queen, we can just play queen to g3. And this is wild. But in the end, it's just going to end up being a bunch of exchanges, and we're going to end up equal material. We're going to get something back, or maybe we're going to get a mate. There's tremendous chances for white to flub this, and we end up in a winning position. There's only one move that actually holds the balance here exactly. So queen g5, another big mess here. But again, I was really focused on this mating idea, which is kind of the theme of this, is I got focused on like one idea and didn't look at other options and why they might be important in the position. So instead I played knight takes f4 because I thought I had calculated here that I was going to end up with the 2 bishops for a rook, which would be fantastic, except for takes, takes. And I looked this far and thought, woohoo, 2 bishops for the rook. This is a fantastic position. But then I get hit with this cold shower of f3, and it's like, and I'm down in exchange for absolutely nothing. This is horrible. I'm way lost. Just to demonstrate why this position is so good. So say you play king f1, which is a ridiculous idea. You would never play that. And just say I play king f8, which alleviates this pin. There's no pin process here. Look at the eval. This is a +4 position for white. It just, if there was ever any doubt, 2 bishops for the rook, always do that. Always. Okay, maybe not always, but like most of the time. The bishops are going to way overpower the rook. I mean, this would be a phenomenal situation. And this is kind of what I thought I was getting. And yeah, but this f3 move. And I played f5. I'm down in exchange. I have a pawn for it, but really it's this pawn that's going to destroy the game. And we'll just go through the rest of the game relatively quickly. It turns out, believe it or not, I won this game. I didn't deserve to at all. Total swindle here. He played d6, and we'll just go through kind of quickly. We can see that like my main problem is I've got to find some way to get rid of this pawn. I can't let this pawn stay on the board. Plays rook e d1. He's defending it. I grab another pawn, and the computer's actually not that bad, not that sad about my position. But I think that if you let it run a little bit deeper, it figures out just how lost I really am. Played bishop to a3, and my idea is that I want to come back to d6 and then win the pawn, and then just grovel and hope for the best. Yeah, I see the eval's already like tanking because it realizes that this is not good at all. He takes. I played here because it was a check. Monkey see a check. Monkey play a check. And now, I mean, the immediate bishop d6 maybe gave me some more chances. I analyzed that a little bit further in the PGN. If you guys look in the description, you'll find a link to the full PGN with a lot more analysis than I'm actually going through in the video. And he brings the king in, and now I finally play this d6 idea. And now, actually, by not going to d6 immediately, get this like worse version of it, because like now I can't move my rook or my bishop or my king. Like I'm reduced to pawn moves. And play g5 because what else am I going to play? I had this dream of being able to advance these pawns, which turns out sometimes you dream and sometimes your dreams come true. He played a4 and played here. And my main goal was like, maybe I can try to force his king to a dark square, and then I can move my bishop with check. And I'm actually maybe going to win a rook that way. Turns out that my opponent was afraid of that same idea. It's just that idea wasn't that dangerous. And his way of avoiding my idea was losing. He played king to f1. And actually the only move is king e3. And after takes, not the bishop, king takes e4, which is like probably what he didn't see. This is such a hard move to like take the pawn and not the bishop. The point is that after I take, he takes, I can play here, and he can just drop the rook back. And this pawn's going to fall. This pawn's going to queen. This is totally a game over situation. I analyze this a bit further because I can actually sort of force the exchange of these pawns, it turns out. But even that is a lost inning. I get more analysis in the PGN if you want to check it out. But as the game went, sorry, I went back too far here. He took, and then I put this, and he went back. And now it's a dead draw. The position is just complete draw. Takes, and I take, and he has to play rook e1. That's the only move. After rook e1, he can exchange both of these pawns for this pawn, and then, I mean, that's the most drawlingest thing ever. But then he took the rook, and like, what? Why would you take the rook? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Why? I mean, you can't exchange the rook. I mean, you can't touch these pawns. They're untouchable. And my king in the square, especially when you capture and drag my king into the square. So he pushes the pawn. I played one more move, and now he resigns. So I got super lucky. This is maybe karma because I did kind of the opposite version of this in my last game. I was totally crushing, made a dumb move, lost it all in the end. So like, this is just karma. Anyhow, my big takeaway here is like to think about more than one idea and to try to introduce yourself to more attacking ideas, because there's a lot of attacking ideas in the Caro-Kann Tartakower, and we shouldn't rely just on this bishop h3. There's more to it than that. And when you fixate on this one idea, you leave yourself away from getting a lot of other opportunities for some better ideas that more suit the position. Anyhow, thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you later. Cheers. Bye-bye.